Welcome to Nerd Heaven. I'm Adam David Collings, the author of Jewel of the Stars, and I am a nerd. This is episode 108 of the podcast, and in this episode I'm going to be talking about the Babylon 5 animated movie, The Road Home. It's been a long time. It's actually been about a year and a half since I posted the last formal episode of this podcast. There's been a couple of little reviews I've posted since then, but yeah, it's been a while. You may remember that I kind of put the podcast on hiatus because I really needed to focus on my writing. I was putting so much effort and time into podcasting and YouTube, all the things that are ultimately meant to support the writing, that I wasn't actually doing any of the writing. Turns out 2024 has been a tough year. There's been all sorts of things happening, but in addition to that, I've had probably less free time this year than I've ever had before in my life. In addition to that, I have been co-editing an anthology, which is really cool, and I'm very excited to be a part of it. But all my writing time has kind of gone to that instead of my own writing, so I really feel like I'm still spinning my wheels. But I thought it's about time I should actually put something up on this feed. If anyone is actually out there still subscribing and listening, I certainly don't expect that there is anyone, but if you are hearing this, then thank you. I appreciate you still being here after a year and a half. I certainly wouldn't have expected that. So anyway, I definitely am not back for regular fortnightly podcasts, but we're going to talk about Babylon 5. So, this movie first aired on the 22nd of July, 2023 at San Diego Comic-Con, and then was officially released on Blu-ray on the 15th of August, 2023. It was written by J. Michael Straczynski and directed by Matt Peters. And the description, according to the Lurker's Guide, reads, John Sheridan unexpectedly finds himself transported through multiple timelines and alternate realities in a quest to find his way back home. Along the way, he reunites with some familiar faces while discovering cosmic new revelations about the history, purpose, and meaning of the universe. So first up, let's talk about the animation style. I think the style is pretty good. It's relatively realistic, it's nicely detailed, and it's nice to look at. I'm by no means an expert on animation styles. I don't watch a lot of animation. But yeah, I like this style. It's not overly stylized. It's got realistic proportions. The characters look like the actors who portrayed them in live action. Babylon 5 station looks fantastic, so I'm really pleased with the animation style. So John and Delenn are on their way to Minbar. This is the moment we've seen at the end of Rising Star, wasn't it? The last episode of Season 5 before Sleeping in Light. In a lot of ways, it feels like the same scene, but done with less emotional resonance. It does seem to be a good way to get any new audiences up to speed with the ISN broadcast. But ultimately, I don't think this movie is for new audiences. But yeah, I mean, JMS has done some little stuff here just to bring people on board, because there's always going to be some people watching for the first time, maybe family members of fans, or maybe just someone who picks it up and says, oh, this is sci-fi, I'll give that a go. We get to see some more of John's little superstitions that he has. He's looking for his lucky socks, the same socks he was wearing when he first took command of Babylon 5. He wants to wear them on the trip to Minbar as he takes command, for want of a better word, of the new Alliance facilities there. But he can't find them. And so when Delenn kind of eggs him on to not wear socks at all, he takes it seriously, and that's exactly what he does. A little bit of humour there. We learn that the capital city of Minbar is called Tuzanor, and I'm pretty certain that's new information. John is not sure he's cut out to be a politician, and to be fair, from what we've seen so far, he's not actually great at it. I mean, he's a very good commander, he's a good captain, he's a good diplomat in general, but he's not so good at being president. But he's also very new to the job and is still learning, so I have confidence that as he grows into the job, he will get better at it. We had a little discussion about Thanksgiving, and John talks about this whole concept of pardoning a turkey. Now, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving in Australia, and I've never heard of this particular tradition. It seems really weird to me. Delenn makes this comment about, no, you've got a holiday where for once you don't kill something. And that just came across felt a little judgmental from her. But this whole thing of using the word pardon, that's really weird to me. Like, Thanksgiving turkeys are not criminals on trial for crimes. They are animals that have been bred for food, which are being killed for food. So this word pardon is really weird. This whole concept to me is very strange. Anyway, we have obviously a new voice actor for Delenn, and for a number of the other major characters whose actors have very sadly passed away since the show was aired. And I think she does a pretty good job. I think they all do a pretty good job. The first time I watched this movie, I was taken out of a little bit just by the jarring sense of these not being the original actors, as is going to be natural on your first watching. My second time around, I was able to just enjoy the performances for what they were, and I was able to accept these new voices as those characters a lot easier than the first time. Similar thing happened to me with Star Wars Clone Wars. At first it was really hard to accept Anakin and Obi-Wan being voiced by different actors, but after a while, those were the voices of the characters. I got used to it. So some weird stuff related to time is happening to John. Now, when time is involved, the effects can travel both directions across your time stream. So consequence can precede cause. We see this in a lot of sci-fi. So although the event hasn't happened yet, he's already feeling some weird effects. So tachyons in the new power generator causes John to become unstuck in time again because of his experiences in War Without End. Now, this time he travels through parallel dimensions or timelines. And this is a different situation to what happened to before, so I'm willing to go along with that. Now, when I first heard the premise of this movie and saw the trailer, I was a bit dubious about this whole idea. Now, multiverse stuff is not what I come to Babylon 5 for. This is more of a classic sci-fi trope. I come to Babylon 5 for other things, for more serious kind of, all the stuff it's good at. But I was willing to give this a go, and I was wondering, can this movie give this whole multiverse thing the unique Babylon 5 treatment, and do it in a Babylon 5 way, do it in a fresh and more interesting and deeper way? So, John's first arrival point is the future. Dr. Franklin is teaching some students, and he's pretty shocked to see John for more than one reason, as we'll soon see. But John now has a mission. He needs to get back to Epsilon 3 and find Zathras. He might be able to help. Now, after John is gone and Garibaldi walks in and says, "Oh no, I just missed him," we learn that this is not actually 18 years since the end of the show. This is actually 23 years, which means that John is already dead, because Sleeping in Light has happened. I would imagine that John told his friends about this experience, and so after they said their final goodbyes on Sleeping in Light, they knew that at some point John would appear in Franklin's classroom. And Garibaldi was hoping and trying to be there when that happened, but really sad that he missed it. That was a nice little sequence there. So the next sequence is on John's parents' farm. Now, when I heard the casting announcement for this movie, one of the characters that was announced as being cast was David Sheridan. Now, I assumed that this would be John and Delenn's son. And I was really looking forward to finally seeing this character on screen for the first time. We've never seen a child of a human and a half Minbari, so I was really curious what he was going to look like. I imagined he'd probably be fairly similar to Delenn. He'd be mostly human, but he'd have the kind of half Minbari bone ridge around his head. Of course, this wasn't that David Sheridan. The character is actually John's father, David Sheridan. So in one way, that was a bit disappointing, but in another, it's cool to see Jon's dad again. Whenever we see Jon with his father, they're always really good scenes, even when Jon's father is actually Kosh. So we learn that this is the year 2258, which means this is season 2. And we get this little backstory of Jon as a child being lost in a cornfield, and how he learned that panic doesn't help. Maybe being calm would help. So he thinks about his mum and dad, and how much he loves them and misses them and wants to be back home with them, and he could almost feel his way home. Now, this is a nice little glimpse into Jon's childhood, but it's also very relevant to his current situation. And it'll come back later as the kind of beginning of the story and the end of the story mirror each other in that sense. But this is a really nice father-son moment, as we often get with these two characters. And it also serves as a metaphor for the current situation and provides the information that Jon will need to actually get home. But we also see that something is chasing him, something ominous. Jon considers this something to flee from. Now, our next sequence is on Zahardum. The Icarus has just landed, and this is basically the moment when they discover and wake the shadows. And I think that this sequence is a real missed opportunity. This could have been a chance to actually see Anna meeting the shadows, and especially give some backstory to Morden. Who was he on the Icarus before he served the shadows? Was he one of the archaeologists? Was he the ship's cook? We don't know. We know nothing about Morden before his first appearance in Signs and Portents. I mean, we know he was on the Icarus. We know that he met the shadows along with Anna. And while Anna chose not to serve the shadows, Morden did. I would love a bit more backstory there. I'd love to see, their conversations, how the shadows convinced him to join their side and essentially betray humanity and the rest of the galaxy. But we don't get any of that, which is a real shame. I feel this whole sequence is kind of wasted, like nothing really happens. I mean, Jon tries to convince the archaeologists not to wake the shadows, but it's too late, and then they appear, and that's it. It is interesting that he's trying to prevent the waking of the shadows. Now, from his perspective, I can totally see why, because this is going to cost Anna her life. If they never woke the shadows, Anna probably would have lived, and they would have had a long and happy marriage. Of course, that also means he never would have married Delenn. But thinking about it, if he had prevented them from waking the shadows, even in this, what is possibly another timeline, or maybe ours, we don't really know at this point, I mean, that would have been bad for the galaxy. All it would have done was delayed the inevitable. At some point, the shadows would have woken and would have rebuilt their forces and would have restarted the cycle of wars, and it would have just kept going on and on over the millennia. But this time, the way things played out, with Jon and Delenn and how it all happened, they were actually able to stop the cycle once and for all and prevent any future wars with the Shadows and Vorlons. So if it hadn't have played out this way, yeah, it would not have been a good thing for the galaxy. All interesting stuff to think about there. Now, each place that Jon is being taken is somehow emotionally meaningful to him. He was just thinking about his love for his family, so his mind would logically go to his late wife. I've got to say, though, that seeing that huge swarm of shadows was pretty cool. Now, at this point in the movie, it's starting to feel just like a collection of vignettes, one after the other. I think I was mainly feeling this here because the Zahardum vignette did nothing. But the story starts to pick up from here. Now, so far, jumping in time, these don't seem to have been parallel timelines. Or what we're seeing could very easily be moments from the future and past in our timeline. I mean, especially that one in the future where they directly reference what happened in Sleeping in Light. But now, this time, we're on Babylon 5. And we know this is an alternate timeline because we've seen this timeline before. Sinclair is still in command, Ivanova is there as his XO, but this is not Season 1. A giant shadow vessel looms over the station and launches fighters. Now, this giant shadow ship is a new design, and it looks pretty menacing. We'll soon learn what I was assuming and hoping at this point, that this is the alternate timeline that occurred if Babylon 4 wasn't sent back in time. The shadows emerge stronger, and Babylon 5 is destroyed. We see glimpses of this timeline in both Babylon Squared and War Without End. Now, this is possibly the best thing about this movie, how it revisits this particular timeline and fleshes it out. I feel like it makes sense of a lot of some of the things that were kind of inconsistencies seen in Babylon Squared due to Michael O'Hare's departure from the show and Jerry Doyle's shaved head. I really like what the movie is doing in this sequence. It's possibly the best part of the movie for me. Now, does Sinclair really believe John, or is he just humouring him because it doesn't really matter right now? He has bigger issues. Long term and ultimately, Sinclair will believe him and trust him. But right now, the evacuation of Babylon 5 is a priority, and John could be an asset, so Sinclair uses him as such. And this is where we get Ivanova's famous distress call speech. That was very cool. We also get a hint of the lead-up to Garibaldi's "This is the moment I was born for" flashback. Sorry, flash forward. John is possibly changing things by his presence in this timeline. He has a plan to blow up the B5 power core to take out the nearby shadow ships and buy time for the shuttles to escape. Then again, we know that in this timeline, Babylon 5 is going to blow up, so maybe it was John all along who caused that, rather than the weapons fire from the shadow ships. Either way, the result is the same. I gotta say that I miss the original PPG sounds. The PPGs are portrayed more like lasers in this movie, both visually and auditorily. I don't really like the change. I mean, lasers are cool, don't get me wrong, but that's not what PPGs are. I always thought that PPGs were cool because they were a unique thing to this particular setting. And I thought they were a very clever idea that, you can't shoot a projectile weapon on a space station because the bullets could pierce the hull and cause decompression. So they shoot these little kind of pellets of superheated plasma, which can, harm physical flesh but not breach the hull. That was a great idea of JMS's. And I just really like the sounds. Such a unique sound for a sci-fi weapon. Anyway, John is talking with the computer, trying to get the station to blow up. And when he orders the self-destruct, the computer responds with, "Are you feeling all right? This isn't one of those 'I'm having a bad day' things." Now, what the hell? This is really weird. Is this meant to be funny? This moment was in the trailer, and when I saw that in the trailer, that really gave me pause and concern. What is going on with the tone of this movie? This is the most bizarre thing to come out of the computer. This... this would almost still feel out of place in the episode Epiphanies, where the Babylon 5 computer was taken over by that weird artificial intelligence. It's just, I don't get it. I really don't get it. It's so cheesy, so weird, so silly. This is not how the Babylon 5 computer would react. So yeah, that was a big stumbling block for me. Anyway, G'Kar and Leeta arrive to help. Leeta very awkwardly tells the new audience of the movie that she is a telepath. That's important information to get across. It's interesting that John is more focused on trying to make things better in this timeline than his actual mission, which is to get back home. But I guess that shows John's character. He's a selfless hero. Now, John manages to escape the explosion and destruction of Babylon 5 by jumping again at just that moment. He's back on Babylon 5, embarrassingly, in Lockley's quarters. And we get some slapstick humour as John kind of stumbles into the closet. I think the squeaky toy sound was a bit much, personally. when we first hear her in this, Tracy Scroggins doesn't sound much like what I remember her sounding like. In fact, I had to check the IMDb just to make sure it really was her. But our voices do change as we get older. I know mine certainly has. So no judgment, just an observation. But as it goes on, I'm hearing more of the familiarity in her voice, in her performance. Now, in this movie, it feels like JMS has changed his writing style for the medium of animation. He's adding kind of cheesy lines like Lita saying, "Oh, I'm here and I'm ready to blow some stuff up." And some weird, very silly humour. Now, I'm not saying we've never had a cheesy line from Lita. I mean, her rant in the tunnels under Mars about how people are telling her she's not a good liar, that comes to mind. And certainly we've not had a lack of humour, even sometimes silly humour in Babylon 5. But he's just pushed it so much further in this, and I don't know, but it feels like maybe he thinks that that's what animation is meant to be. If that's the case, then I would strongly disagree. I don't think you should be changing the tone because of the medium. I think, the medium of animation can be just as serious as the medium of live action. I just want this to be Babylon 5 that happens to be animated, as opposed to animated Babylon 5, if you understand the distinction. But the weirdest of all of this stuff comes now. Zathras won't let John say "Lost in Space" due to issues with copyright. This is absolutely insane. What on earth was JMS thinking here? This is the kind of fourth wall breaking line you'd expect from a Leslie Nielsen movie, not Babylon 5. I honestly can't believe he went there. And this same joke comes back a bit later. I don't like this at all. It comes close to ruining the movie for me. I just can't imagine why JMS thought this was a good idea. I mean, I get the whole connections to Lost in Space with Bill Mumy, but this is not a parody. This is... Why would you do that? I think John and Lockley are being a little bit harsh about Zathras. He and his brothers are not as bad as these two are making out. Although I've got to say that he's got a heck of a lot more brothers here than I thought we had previously established. Of course, not all of them may be from family Zathras. Maybe there are others of his species from other families, but they still all look and sound the same. Who knows? Zathras gives us some rather bad news with a little technobabble, but good technobabble. John's jumping is causing timelines to collapse on each other. This could destroy the entire multiverse. And honestly, I think John takes this news very lightly when he says, "Yeah, well, that's all very nice, but I just came here for a time stabilizer." But John's going to need a lot more than just a time stabilizer. He needs to be stabilized himself by the Great Machine. But a new jump is coming, and so that thing that's pursuing him shows up again. John can't keep calm enough to stay long enough to be stabilized. He jumps again. And this next sequence where he ends up, this is a very dark place. He's on Earth. Londo and Ivanova are here waiting for the end of the world. In this reality, they lost the Shadow War. And it's such a joy to hear Peter Jurasik performing Londo again. It was wonderful to get all of these characters back, but there's just something about Peter Jurasik and the way, and the accent and the way he talks, and Londo is one of my favourite characters. In fact, one of most people's favourite characters. So, yeah, really, really cool. So the Vorlons are destroying Earth because of the Shadow influence. This was their tactic at the end of the war in our timeline. Susan and Londo are very calm for people who know they're about to die in minutes. But this isn't necessarily wrong. It's hard to imagine how we'll all react to the certain inevitable death like this. And they kind of face this with the kind of dignity I'd expect from these two characters. They can't run, so they don't. And honestly, I can't imagine Londo going out any other way other than with a glass in his hand. Of course, John jumps away just before the end, narrowly avoiding death again. This whole thing is a pretty spectacular sequence, and definitely one of my favourites in the movie. It's kind of heartbreaking to watch, though, even if it's just a cartoon, and even if it's just an alternate timeline. This is Earth, and everyone on it exploding, and everyone on that planet dying. Whew! So John ends up in some kind of void. G'Kar is there, but it's not really G'Kar. It is something that is appearing to him in the image of a friend, because it senses John needs a friend. And this is where we kind of get the philosophical message of the movie. So this is the Rim. Now, Babylon 5 has always been a bit inconsistent about what exactly the Rim is. Is it just the edge of the Milky Way galaxy? Is it the border of unexplored space, which could just be a moving and changing kind of thing? Here, it's described as being the edge of everything. On one side, silence, nothingness, the void. On the other side, everything. And I'm not sure this is entirely consistent with any of the portrayals of the Rim we've experienced in previous episodes. Maybe a little consistent with the whole Shadows and Vorlons going beyond the Rim, and then John going beyond the Rim and sleeping in light, but I don't know. This whole Rim thing has never really made sense. Like, it's definitely been inconsistent. So John says the last time he saw G'Kar, he was heading toward the Rim to see what was on the other side. And I don't think that's quite accurate. I mean, this is John directly after the end of Season 5. This is not, far in the future, after the whole G'Kar and Lita thing is finished, because we know G'Kar comes back and is no longer with Lita at the time of Legend of the Rangers. This is John at the end of Season 5. The last time he saw G'Kar was leaving with Lita to head out to explore unexplored space. I don't think they even mentioned the Rim. But apparently, G'Kar discovered what is on the other side of the Rim. Whoever or whatever this thing is, it wanted to meet John at the precipice of all things. Because he is dangerous. Because he is causing the destruction of the universes. G'Kar talks about the Great Experiment. The Minbari belief that the universe itself is sentient, that it broke itself apart into all of us in order to understand itself. He says if the universe is not observed, there is nobody to think about it and give it meaning. Does it really exist? This cannot be what it must be without something to see it. The observer affects the observed. That is the secret, the missing piece. For now, John is the observer. If he dies, everything dies. And he talks about the universe having one quest, one word. Why? And isn't that just the ultimate question that we all ask about so many things? Now, it seems here that G'Kar is actually the universe itself speaking to John. For all intents and purposes, God. In all realities, the everything of everything, there is no force greater than love. Tearing apart is easy. Destruction and hate don't endure. What love knits together can never be torn asunder. The universe bends to that power. When the observer sees through love, anything is possible. That's all G'Kar has to say. John has so many more questions, but that is the glory and wonder of mortality. So this is all very interesting. There's a lot of flowery words that are kind of saying something, but maybe not a whole lot. I mean, I don't agree, obviously, with the Minbari theology, but I can definitely get behind what JMS is saying here about love. That's, quite consistent with my personal beliefs. But what John doesn't realise yet is that this message about love is crucial to his understanding of what's happening to him. John is back on Babylon 5, a form of it. In this reality, the station is run by a clean-shaven Sheridan in Earth Force uniform. He doesn't believe John, which is understandable. So he has Lita scan him to verify. And that's smart. So we learned that the Shadow War never happened here. But time-wise, this is late Season 3. IPX went out of business years ago, so the Icarus never went to Zahar-Dum. So I'd assume Anna is still alive in this reality, and probably on the station, living with her husband, John, who was the captain. They don't know about Zathras or the Great Machine, but it's all still down there. Zathras is coming to the station. I wonder what specifically caused them not to go down to Epsilon 3. I mean, I guess the alien that was in the Great Machine wasn't dying, and so it wasn't causing all the problems to the surface of the planet that at first attracted their attention. Who knows? So it seems that all the Zathrai, as Zathras refers to them all collectively, keep in touch across realities using quantum communications. Zathras has that time stabilizer that the Zathras of a different timeline was constructing. The Great Machine has done its job, and so he's got this ready to give to John. Now, John has to remember what he was thinking just before he vanished the first time. He was thinking about Delenn. Just like in the cornfield, he can follow that feeling. How much he loves his wife, all the way back home. But he's so far off course, he can't find his way back alone. But then he's not alone. And that's when Delenn appears. That thing that's been chasing him? It was Delenn. It wasn't hunting him to hurt him, but pursuing him out of love. And this is all very heartwarming, in a good way. This is reminiscent of how his love for Delenn gave him something to live for on Zahar-Dum. As a married man, this is very meaningful and touching to me. Now, the ending is surprising. John makes it back home, but we don't follow him through the time vortex back to the original timeline. Our perspective stays in this alternate reality. In this timeline, Delenn never went through the chrysalis. She's still full Minbari. And it doesn't look like these two are together, which would make sense because Anna is probably still alive. Sinclair is also still around. He and Lockley are both currently on the station, but neither runs the place. I wonder why Sinclair left the station in this reality. Now, the ending sequence here suggests, and I do believe JMS has confirmed this, that if he ever makes another animated movie, he'd like to remain here in this alternate timeline. This is the sandbox that he wants to play in. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, it would be interesting to see how things play out in this different reality and explore it more. But ultimately, this is not the universe I care about. The original B5 timeline is what I care about. And there are still many stories to be told there. We've never seen the Telepath War on screen. And what happened regarding the Drakh Plague on Earth? But as always, I'm willing to trust JMS. He rarely steers us wrong. I mean, there was that Legend of the Rangers, but you know. No writer is perfect. Certainly not me. So, that is the animated movie, The Road Home. Ultimately, I enjoyed it. It was a fun ride. This is definitely not a starting point for new fans of the series. This is very much a movie for existing fans. It wasn't a groundbreaking story. It wasn't what Babylon 5 does best. It's hard for Babylon 5 to do what it does best in movie form because so much of what makes it special is the serialized nature, the long-term story arcs, the long-term character arcs. B5 is best when it is TV, when it is seasons of TV. But this was a good time. Ultimately, it was just, as a Babylon 5 fan, it was so nice to be able to go back and see a new story in this universe, to spend some time with these characters again. And for that reason, I really like this movie. Of the attempted renewals. We've had a few things. There was that Legends of the Rangers, which I was not a huge fan of, obviously. I liked the Lost Tales a lot more than most, but I can see why JMS didn't want to continue, because he just didn't have the budget to do it justice. From a technical sense, they were a bit rough. But I think this is definitely the best revival attempt that we have seen. I'm not really considering Crusade to be a revival. That was a whole spin-off. And if you've listened to my stuff before, well, actually, I don't know. I haven't really talked about Babylon 5 much on this particular podcast. But, I really like Crusade, and I'm heartbroken that it didn't get to continue. There was so much potential in that show, and there was already stuff that I thought was really good. Anyway, that's Crusade. That's pretty much my thoughts on this movie. Not mind-blowing, but a very enjoyable ride. So that's the podcast. So when will I be back, and what will I talk about next? Well, I don't know when I will be back exactly. I do intend to still make podcast episodes from time to time. There's so much cool sci-fi out there that I still want to talk about. It'd be fun to actually do a series on something like, there's a show, Terra Nova, which I really like, which is another short-lived thing. The Netflix Lost in Space reboot, I really enjoyed that. That'd be cool to talk about. I've already said I had plans to talk about all the remaining Star Trek TOS movies, which I have not forgotten about. I also hinted that I might talk about the animated Transformers series, which may or may not happen at some point. I don't know. But the next thing you'll see appear on this feed is actually going to be something related to my writing. That's one of the reasons I wanted to record this podcast, because I didn't want to just, throw something about my book at all of you without actually giving you something of what you actually came to this podcast for, which is to listen to me geek out about sci-fi. So, I wanted to make sure I got this episode out first. But you will be seeing something kind of special related to my book series, Jewel of the Stars. I'm not going to tell you what that is yet. You'll just have to wait and see. The first people who hear about this will be my mailing list, which you can sign up for and get a free short story from my universe for free, just by going to adamdavidcollings.com/free. I'm pretty proud of that story, and it's a great lead-in to Jewel of the Stars. So that'll come soon. In the meantime, until we speak next, live long and prosper. Make it so.